A lot of you guys have been asking me to react to TikToks of people faking mental health disorders. However, I don't have TikTok. I know, I'm old. I really don't like TikTok. I don't like the idea of watching short videos for quick laughs. I prefer long form content, so it's not my thing. However, I have seen some of the compilations. I don't particularly want to talk about faking mental health disorders in this video. Instead, I want to talk about faking Tourette syndrome, because a lot of people have confused mental health disorder with Tourette's. However, for housekeeping's sake, I will go into a short snippet as to what I think about these TikToks. Number one, I can't tell you whether or not the people have the mental health disorders they claim to, or if they don't. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. The only thing I do have is a degree in psychology and experience working in the mental health and healthcare field. Number two, I don't accept self-diagnoses as official valid forms of diagnosis. And before you jump into me being elitist with mental health and being some kind of privileged idiot, I have a video going over the reasons people self-diagnose, the pros and the cons of it, and why I think the cons of it aren't outweighing the benefits of self-diagnosis. In fact, I believe self-diagnosis to be a harmful practice. And the last point I have, which you can watch my video on YouTubers versus mental health to get full context, is the way that mental health is portrayed online and mental health communities. I don't think that creating content around your mental health is particularly healthy, and I think that there are some problems with mental health communities. Again, you can go and watch that video for more context on why I believe this. But I would like to talk about Tourette specifically, because when I see videos criticizing TikTok users in particular for faking mental health disorders, they also lump them in with people who are faking Tourette syndrome. And while I don't like commenting on the validity of another person's health, whether that be mental or physical, I can tell which TikTok users are faking when they describe Tourette syndrome as a mental health disorder. Tourette's is not a mental health disorder. Tourette syndrome is a neurological condition that causes unwanted, involuntary muscle movements and sounds known as tics. I'll be giving you a brief overview of the history of Tourette's throughout the ages, because Tourette's, how it was perceived and how it was thought it should be treated, has definitely changed over the years. Let's head back to the year 1486, with the Malus Maleficarum first being published, I guess. This is thought to be the first recorded description of tics, attributing them to demonic possession by the devil. That sounds about right for the time period, eh? If you can't explain something, it must be witchcraft. Let's head forward just under 200 years later in 1825. Just a warning, here on out, it's going to be a lot of French names. My French accent is terrible, my pronunciation will be terrible. We'll just have to deal with it together. The first case of Tourette's was recorded. Dr. Jean-Marc Gaspard Itard reported episodes of what would later be understood to be coprolalia, involuntary swearing or use of obscene language, from the Marquis of Dampierre. Some point after this, a French physician, Jean-Martin Jacot, assigned his student Georges de la Tourette. Yeah? Tourette? You seeing where we get the name from? To study patients with movement disorders. They both believed the tic illness to be a chronic and progressive hereditary condition. In 1885, Gilles de la Tourette published Study of a Nervous Affliction, an account of 9 patients with ticking problems. Between 1918 to 1929, psychoanalytic theory was so prominent that it was believed tics must be accompanied by underlying psychological disturbances. If you don't know, psychoanalytic theory presumes that there are 2 matters of being: the physical, which is the brain, the actual organ, and the mind, which is an abstract concept that aims to explain thoughts and feeling. Many psychological problems would be written off as being part of the unconscious mind, thoughts, feelings, and experiences that we aren't currently aware of because they've been suppressed. Patients and families were told that their own psychological maladaptions were to blame, compounding the burden of treatment onto them. It's great practice. Yay guys, well done. Until the early 1970s, psychoanalysis was the preferred intervention for Tourette's, what we now know to be a neurological condition. Great stuff, everybody. Between the 1960s and 1970s, the benefits of haloperidol, an antipsychotic medication had on treating tics, was noted. In 1968, Arthur K. Shapiro, who is known to be the father of modern tic disorder research, reported his treatment of a Tourette's patient using haloperidol in an article that highly criticized the psychoanalytic approach alongside his wife Elaine. In 1972, Arthur and Elaine worked alongside Tourette's patients to find the Tourette Syndrome Association, arguing that the condition was a neurological condition rather than a psychological one. During the 1990s, the view that Tourette's is a genetic predisposition that interacts with non-genetic and environmental factors emerged. Despite this, the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders still includes Tourette's, a decision I heavily disagree with, and I'm hoping they'll remove it in their next edition, because it's not, though. To be diagnosed, the patient must have tics present for over a year, and these can start as young as 4, peaking around 8 to 12 years old. Physical tics can include blinking, eye rolling, shrugging, jerking of the head and or limbs. Vocal tics can include throat clearing, whistling, clicking, saying random words/phrases, or repeating a word/sound/phrase. Tics may become worse during times of stress, anxiety, or tiredness. A study by the CDCP found that 0.3% of the population had a Tourette's diagnosis, though other research indicates the actual prevalence is 0.6%, meaning only half are diagnosed. Risk factors may include family history of Tourette's and gender. Males are 3 to 4 times more likely than females to develop Tourette's. 85% of patients display a genetic link, but this doesn't account for all Tourette's cases. Traumatic head injury or strokes may also trigger Tourette's, and an excess of dopamine or increased sensitivity to dopamine has been implicated in the condition. Similarities with other conditions have also been noted. Parkinson's disease is a progressive nervous system disorder that affects movement. Patients with Parkinson's have been known to have involuntary movements that could also be described as tics. However, it's important to note that these aren't exactly the same as tics and Tourette's and are more so known as tremors. So there you go, folks, that is what Tourette's is. It's now largely believed to be a neurological condition and not a psychological one. Why it's in the DSM is still very, very confusing to me. It shouldn't be there, in my opinion. However, I also find it important to note that there are mental health conditions that are co-current with Tourette's, such as anxiety, depression, and OCD. Although this is more likely to do with having to experience Tourette's and live through it, rather than Tourette's having a psychological component. So there's a very brief history of Tourette's and what exactly it is. But why are people on TikTok and other social media now trying to pretend to have Tourette's? Well, it's a problem that comes along with self-diagnosis and how we view mental health disorders as well as neurological problems, although Tourette's, as I've said before, is somehow being lumped in with the mental health disorders. I'm not going to deny that a portion of the people saying they have Tourette's online do in fact have Tourette's, but I'm going to be talking about the people who may be misguided in the notion that they have Tourette's or are outright faking it. So what would make somebody think they have Tourette's when they don't? Tourette's, as mentioned before, is primarily a disorder characterized by involuntary speech/noises and movements. But it isn't the only disorder that has these symptoms. I also mentioned before that Parkinson's has involuntary movements. I think that some people may be self-diagnosing with Tourette's because they genuinely do have these symptoms, but because Tourette's is the popular explanation, they tend to go with that without knowing that there are other disorders that have similar symptoms. This is one of the major problems that we have when it comes to self-diagnosis: overlapping symptoms. You may think that you have one disorder, but you actually have a completely different disorder. Or people can appropriate symptoms while looking for a solution to what they have. For example, if you had a restless leg and you mistook it for a tic, and then you learnt about Tourette's, you might subconsciously pick up some of those symptoms because that's what you believe you have. It's like when you tell a lie over and over again and you start to believe it. Some people may not have Tourette's, but over time genuinely believe that they do. This may be especially true for younger people who are far more impressionable. Sometimes it's much easier to trick yourself into thinking that you have an answer if you live in a place like the United States that doesn't have universal healthcare. It may be much harder for people to try and find the answer to that question due to money issues, and therefore having the answer in front of them brings a sense of closure. As for people who genuinely do know that they don't have Tourette's and simply fake it, there are numerous reasons as to why they may do this. The first and most obvious is attention, and from that attention they may gain financially. As well as this, it's also to do with identity. We live in a society now wherein we are more aware of the minority experience of living in a majority society than ever before, and sometimes the minority experience can be romanticized. We are far more aware of the injustice that certain racial groups, the LGBTQ community, and neurodivergent people experience, and therefore being part of the majority isn't necessarily cool. Being white middle-class neurotypical isn't really what we define as the hot new thing. It's kind of backwards. We need those things to somehow have privilege in society, but now the younger generations tend to be rejecting that in favour of relating to the minority, and this can show in many different ways, including faking certain aspects of themselves such as neurodivergence. Not only does it separate themselves from being part of the oppressive group, but it also gives them a sense of community with the people that they intend to relate to. Overall, it is pretty damn harmful to pretend to have a mental health disorder or a neurological condition that you do not have. It takes away from the voices of those who actually have these conditions and do live with them on the daily. I would say to the people that are fully aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it, to really sit back and reflect and think about the harm that you are possibly causing. The sliver of attention that you're getting today will not be worth it in the long run. You should try and find ways in order to support people with these certain conditions and illnesses rather than trying to take it on yourself. And if you genuinely do think that you may have Tourette's, I understand that there are certain healthcare problems when it comes to the United States and other countries, and even in countries with universal healthcare, waiting times can be long. Whether it's to do with time or money, you are much better off waiting until you can actually see a professional and talk to them, because then you will have an answer for yourself, and you will know your health much better. I think that's all I really have to say for this video. I didn't want to just react to TikToks of people faking disorders because there are plenty of videos on those, and I just wanted to talk about what is Tourette's, the history of Tourette's, and why exactly people may fake it. And I hope that this video was informative and slightly entertaining, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.